Alright, welcome back to the channel. Warhammer Man back in the studio, and today we're taking a look at the new Warcry Heart of Ghur, aka the Age of Sigmar skirmish battle. So let's take a look at what's going on here, but actually this article from GW, or from Warhammer Community, is called Designing the Characterful New Heart of the Ghur Warbands for Warcry, and it talks a little bit about the Rotmire Creed and the Horns of Hasut. But actually, that's not why we're looking at this article today. We're looking at this article today because basically Games Workshop has just indirectly come out and said that from now on, this next year of Warcry, or if you want to play Warcry, or if you're interested in collecting Warcry, etc., get ready to spend $1,000 this year. So that being said, you're wondering what I'm talking about. Obviously, we have the breakdown here and everything. So we'll just kind of skim through the beginning of this article, and then let's talk about why Warcry is $1,000 now. So we've met the Rotmire Creed and the Horns of Hasut, the followers of Lord Leech and the Father of Darkness on the battlefield, taking a closer look at these fantastic new miniatures from the Heart of Ghur box set. Gnarlwood fashion show, insight from the miniatures designers themselves. So they're just talking a little bit about how they came up with these designs and everything. Full spoiler alert, I like these models. I like this terrain. I think this is a cool new box set. I definitely think it's overpriced. But realistically, the idea of the Rotmire Creed, which is basically like an organic kind of like savage warband, in this case kind of tainted by Nurgle, sort of swampy and bamboo-y. They are essentially just a parallel from the Untamed Beasts. The Untamed Beasts were like savages, but they were more like barbarian-esque and very organic, and used essentially bones to create weapons from. And then they were paired up against, in this case, the Horns of Hasut, which are all about like the metal armor and the forge and the fire and all that stuff, basically like the polar opposite. And then they were essentially the equivalents of the iron golems from the first box set, who again were all about the armor and the metal and all that stuff. So realistically, these are sort of just like reskinned new versions of the first Warcry box set gangs. The Rotmire Creed is essentially the Untamed Beast. The Horns of Hasut is essentially the Iron Golems. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean I don't like them or anything, but there's definitely some parallels going on here. So, essentially, having lived in the fetid swamplands for their entire lives, the Rotmire Creed have made the most of their surroundings. Their clothing and weaponry are all organic in nature, and they carry very few things into the smooth, manufactured finish. In many places, they are covered in moss and lichen. You can take the Creed out of the swamp, but you can't take the swamp out of the Creed. So, they talk a little bit about, the designs and everything. Here's our Witherlord. He's the leader of the Rotmire Creed. Very, very nice looking model. I really like it. He's got like the creepy Nurgle kind of infection syringe. He's got like the cool bamboo helmet. The little sort of like Nurgling kind of looking toad hanging out on him. And then he has one of these sort of sticks with the rope hook on it. Pretty cool. And then obviously he's on stilts, so he doesn't fall into the swamp water or get devoured by some creature that's in it already. Then we have the bloated ones. These dudes basically have like Wolverine claws. It's like 3 crazy claws and then 3 a little less dramatic. Little spikes coming out of his head. Again, really nice looking models overall. Mirefolk Outcast. Pretty cool. A little more basic. Obviously, he's got his little blowgun on his side. A couple of weapons. Some rot. Some mold. Some skulls. And then on to the Horns of Hasut. The Ruinator Alpha. While many disagree on almost everything, one thing the Ruinator Alpha shares with her opposite number is the resolution that as a warband leader, they should have the biggest hat. Known as the Hashutar, these holy helms are only worn by the Fathers of Darkness, most valued warriors. Their armor too is covered in Duradin, ruins of protection. They've even got hoof-shaped toe caps. So yeah, obviously they are all about the sort of like bull. Can't think of the name of the movie, but definitely reminds me of like the worshippers in that movie. But yeah, like the little toes obviously have like the cleft toe deal going on. They definitely have a lot of a look of the Necromunda warband in there also. The helmets, the face masks, the armor just looks a lot like the corpse grinder cult, which isn't bad. I actually really like the corpse grinder cult. So on to the demolisher. You can arm the demolishers with a deadly flame hurler, the Duradin that worship the father of darkness. Originally used these devices to light their forges, but they work just as well on people. The bag at the back is squeezed like a bagpipe in order to force gas past the nozzle where it is ignited. At least it's not an actual set of bagpipes. So here we see the demolisher. Pretty cool. He has a flamethrower, obviously. Range weapons are pretty strong in Warcry, but most bands don't have many of them. And the ones that have good range tend to not get a lot of active members. And typically, Warcry is definitely about killing, but it's also a lot about the objectives and being quick and nimble, and also kind of piling onto the objectives. So sometimes being a ranged warrior, even if you're really good, not going to be as good in Warcry as it is in 40k or Kill Team, etc. It's definitely much more of a combat kind of trading off. So then we have the Shatterers. These guys are obviously a little more like slavey. They're kind of chained up. They have like weak armor, definitely like weaker weapons. They're for sure like the servants of the group. So that being said, that's the warbands. That's essentially the meat of the article, just kind of showing them off. We've seen a couple of the rules. The new reactions are pretty cool. We've seen a little bit from each of the warbands. They look pretty good. Definitely excited for Warcry in general, as it's a really fun game. If you haven't played Warcry, it's essentially what the new Kill Team is based off of, and the new Kill Team is probably my favorite game. The alternating activations, the skirmish style combat, the randomness of your setup and win conditions, all that stuff makes Warcry extremely fun. So essentially, if you've never played the game before, you basically draw the 4 cards at the beginning of the game, and they determine how you set up the board is one of the cards. And then there's basically missions, which is what you have to do to win. Then there's deployments, so you break your warband up into a couple separate, 3 separate groups, and then you deploy one group, and then your opponent deploys a group, etc. And they all have to start in certain quadrants of the board. And then finally your 4th card is the twist card, and is basically just some crazy condition that's going to affect the battle. All ranged weapons are, at a negative, or in combat everybody does a little extra damage because of the blood moon, or essentially just something to that effect that just kind of alters the game state. So if any one of those cards draws differently, even if you play the other 3 conditions the same, it's going to make for a completely different game. Even if you played everything the exact same with the same cards and everything, and I'm pretty sure they brought back all 4 of the card conditions. Not 100%, but I'm pretty sure they did. But essentially, you could play the same game again, and just by changing your deployment, the game is completely different, because maybe you made a big mistake, or your opponent did, etc. So I really like the idea of Warcry, how it plays, the alternating activations, no crazy amount of chain activations. Super fun game overall. One thing that was really nice about Warcry, though, is it didn't have a bunch of rules bloat. There wasn't a bunch of extra books you had to buy. You didn't have to keep up with the Joneses and constantly be making purchases to play Warcry. There was pretty sparse expansions, which makes sense, because obviously 40k is their big game. Sigmar is their sort of, living in the shadow of 40k. So the same way Kill Team is pretty popular, but not nearly as popular as 40k, obviously Warcry is fairly popular, but not nearly as popular as Sigmar. So this is many, many steps down from 40k, let alone from Kill Team and Sigmar. So that being said, the new box is only the beginning. This big announcement right here, or this little plan, is what has me kind of, I don't want to say worried, but a little skeptical about the situation. So obviously it's nice to always see new content, new games, new stuff, but the bloat that's happening in Games Workshop right now is definitely getting out of control. Every one of their games is now embarking on this quote-unquote seasons, and when I hear seasons, all that means is, hey, if you want to keep up with what's going on in this game, or competitive, or collecting, etc., you're going to need to make regular purchases. And with Games Workshop's prices, we know they're going to be big purchases. So in this announcement, we'll talk a little bit about it. We see the Warcry Heart of Ghur. This box is only the beginning. And then we see the Heart of Ghur season 2022-2023. So now we know they have a season, major quarterly expansions with all new warbands, terrain, and more. So we see 3 boxes down here. We know each of them represents a quarter, including the Heart of Ghur. And we know, obviously, that each of them, as it says down here, major quarterly expansions with all new warbands, terrain, and more. So we have 2 warbands plus terrain here, 2 warbands plus terrain here, 2 warbands plus terrain here, 2 warbands plus terrain here. So by the end of the year, we're going to have 8 new warbands, 4 new sets of terrain, and then also the compendium. Or I shouldn't say by the end of the year, by the next seasonal year. So 1 year from now or whatever. That seems like a lot. And now with the new price increase on the box set, we know this is now $230. So that's $460. So now we're looking at $920 plus the compendium is probably going to be $60. So now we're looking at $980 USD. So $1,000 for this season of Warcry. So what went from the type of game that you could literally just pick up a warband for like $50, and if your opponent had a rule book and you had a playing surface to play on, maybe some scatter terrain, you could play a game. So now this went from, you can still do that. You could probably still buy a warband, maybe the compendium now. So maybe your minimum entry is 120 now, or you could split one of these boxes with your buddy and get in for 115. But that substantially raises the price of Warcry, in my opinion, and I don't think that's a good idea. In my opinion, they should be going the opposite direction with this. They should have come out with the starter for Warcry, just like they did for Kill Team, where you basically get a bunch of scatter terrain, 2 warbands, and a mini rulebook with all the rules, and then a separate mini rulebook with the rules for the warbands or whatever. That would have been smart, in my opinion, and put that at $100 like they did for Kill Team. That takes away the barrier entry and makes it so anybody can just pick this up, get in. You can essentially pay for $100 and convincing one of your friends or family members or spouse or whatever to play with you. $100, you're in a new game, and then after that you can expand on from it. This and the whole idea of seasons, this looks like a game killer to me. Now I could be wrong. The seasons for 40k are fairly popular. The seasons for Sigmar are okay. The seasons for Kill Team have been fairly well received. But when we saw the necromunda kind of like plans and everything, it was very obvious that necromunda was about to get super bloated, and it's probably the most bloated game there is, or one of them. Necromunda has more books per like faction and available purchase than any other game does. I mean, 40k has the most books by far. Sigmar has a lot of books and content as well. But for the amount of units that you can buy and the amount of total stuff that's available for sale compared to like how many books there are for necromunda, it by far dwarfs everything else. I mean, it's crazy how much you would have to buy if you want to collect everything or play all the warbands or gangs or whatever. Now it feels like that's what's happening to Warcry. Now I could be wrong. I love Warcry. I love the miniatures. I love the idea of the game. It's super fun and everything. But to tell you the truth, it never really picked up where I'm at. It's not that popular. I've never like seen other people just randomly playing Warcry other than the small group of people that like, I play with, collect, paint, etc. with. So that being said, it's not like 40k or even Kill Team or even Sigmar where you could just walk into a random shop and people are playing Warcry. And so the goal is to change that, to get people to be playing Warcry, random people, to build the game, build the hobby, build the sales, grow the business. That is Games Workshop's goal. Now, they might take out some of those initial things, grow the hobby, have fun, etc., for more business-oriented, but that's fine. That makes sense. They're a business. They're supposed to make money. That being said, this is not going to grow the business. This is going to kill the game. There's a certain number of people that don't care and are going to buy the new Warcry for $230 regardless. There's a certain people that are not going to buy it no matter what. But there's also a big group of people that are buying this if it's 175 or 190 or 200 that aren't buying it if it's over 210 or 220 or 230. There's a lot of people that are probably on the verge of getting into the game and then see the price and turn the other direction. And that's what I don't like. It's not that I can't afford this Warcry game or I can't afford to spend $1,000 by the end of the year. It's the fact that I know that by pricing this game at $1,000 for a year of content, and that's assuming nothing else comes out. We just get 4 big boxes and the compendium, which was announced. That's $1,000 for the year. From here till a year from now, $1,000. That's not going to happen for most people. That's literally $200 and basically $50 per quarter, $250 per quarter. And then if we divide that up by 4 months, You're talking about $60 per month to play Warcry for the year. I mean, realistically, it's more than that. I think I just did some bad math right there. $240 for a quarter, so really it should be $80 per month. I'm sorry. So let's say $80 per month to play Warcry, and that's just one of their games. So then if you want to play 40K too, or you want to play Kill Team also, and it's somewhere around the same amount, you're talking about like $200 a month to play your GW games. Probably more. I think this is really going to kill the game and scare a lot of people away. Now, the benefit of this is that it's Warcry, so not that many people are going to quit if this is too expensive for them, and not that many people are going to just not play if this is too expensive for them, because they already weren't playing. So it's not going to hurt Warcry that much, but it's not going to help them either. And that's my problem with this. So the major quarterly expansions, all new warbands, terrain, and more. If you want to put a ton of content on the community, a ton of miniatures, a ton of box games, a ton of terrain, a ton of books, that's fine, but you have to price it reasonably, or you're just going to, this is just overwhelming, I think, to most people. I think most people see this and know they're about to spend roughly $250 to, $1,000, depending on what the time frame is, and I think they're just like, you know what, I'm not going to dedicate $1,000 to Warcry. It's easy to get people to say, well, I'll pay 100 here, 100 there, pay to play a little bit, keep up. But $1,000 is not a small commitment for a lot of people. So what's more, these miniatures will all be usable in games of Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and by the end of the season, you'll have enough scenery to fill an entire battlefield. Don't forget, you'll be able to pre-order Heart of Ghur box set from Saturday. So that being said, that's my opinion. That's my rant. Games Workshop just made Warcry cost $1,000. It's very unfortunate. I don't like it. I like the content itself. I like what they're doing. I like the idea of it. But the whole seasons thing and sort of this overwhelming new floor plan of purchases, I think this is really going to kill the game and really scare a lot of people away. I don't think this is going to help Warcry. I don't think that... Here's the problem, in my opinion, and then we'll wrap it up there. Games Workshop had a bunch of success with the Indominus set for 40K and the release of 9th edition. So they tried to use that same exact thing on Sigmar in Dominion, and Dominion was a complete flop. Now, if you ask Games Workshop, they did great. They sold all the copies they made, so it was a complete success. But really, they used some shady tactics to trick stores and people into FOMOing into Dominion, thinking it was going to be gone like Indominus, but they made either way too many or the demand was way too little, because now you can find Dominion all over the country, all over the world, at less than 50% off, or more than 50% off of retail. So it retailed at $200, and you can buy Dominion for $100 or less, all over the country, all over the world right now. So that being said, that's a complete failure. Even if Games Workshop sold all their copies, they did it by tricking all of the retail stores and customers into buying them, and now there's still thousands, hundreds of thousands of these boxes just sitting on store shelves all over the world. So they did the same map then with Kill Team, where they essentially put out this floor plan and said, hey, this is what the future is going to look like, this is what boxes you're going to get, etc. And Kill Team has been growing pretty good, and it's been okay, and it hasn't been overwhelming, but a lot of the companion teams feel like they've sort of been left behind. But overall, Kill Team's great, and I think they've done well with it. My problem is that Kill Team is based in the 40K universe, so naturally it's going to be much more popular than Warcry. So if Kill Team is the less popular 40K skirmish game, and Warcry is the less popular Age of Sigmar skirmish game, coming out and trying to repeat what failed for Sigmar after it worked for 40K is the same as trying to repeat, what they did for Kill Team, which is probably going to fail for Warcry. So in my opinion, it's a big mistake, and it's going to cost them dearly in both growth, and I think honestly it's going to be tough to maintain the player base. To tell you the truth, the overall Warcry community, I think, is not even excited about a new edition. I think for the most part, Warcry is the type of game where people are just like, man, as soon as we heard there was going to be new rules, new edition, whatever, most of us were just like, man, I hope they don't ruin this with a bunch of new rules bloat and power creep. The new models are great, but again, I think this is a big mistake. If they would have left the pricing around 190, 200, maybe even 210, I think they probably could have got away with this a little healthier. But I think pushing up towards that $1,000 to play a game, in a 1 year period. And again, you don't need to spend $1,000. You could buy a Warcry for $50. You could buy the compendium for $50 or $60. Play the game for around $100, and that's fine. But I think most people like the idea of collecting or building, and obviously the idea of getting a bunch of terrain that's in this setting is to build this into a big terrain set that you can then play in Sigmar or some massive game of Warcry, etc. And I just don't think it's going to bite. So that's my opinion. A little different spin on this article and what's to come. Let me know what you think down below. Do you play Warcry? Do you play Sigmar and not Warcry? Do you play 40k? Do you play 40k and not Kill Team? Or do you play Kill Team? I'm curious. How many people play? So if you have the time or you don't mind, in the comments, leave down below what games you play of the big ones. 40k, Sigmar, Warcry, Kill Team, and maybe Necromunda. And now, or Horus Heresy, or any of those 6. Which ones do you play? Leave it down in the comments. And by play, you don't have to play. Maybe you just buy and collect the models. Because definitely this channel is for everybody, players and collectors alike, painters, etc. But which ones are you involved in? I'm curious about that to get an honest scope of the community. So that being said, going to go ahead and wrap it up there. If you did enjoy today's video, if you like daily reaction reviews and news, painting, modeling, conversion tutorials, make sure you check out the channel content. We are over 5,000 subscribers. Thank you to everybody that subscribed. Absolutely phenomenal. Love growing this channel. Next big milestone, 7,500, 10,000. The sky is the limit. I appreciate everybody that takes the time to subscribe, like, share, comment, and obviously, love the community and all the positivity. But that is it for today. If you do enjoy Warhammer 40,000, Kill Team, Necromunda, Age of Sigmar, Warcry, and Horus Heresy, if you're into daily reactions, reviews, and news, painting, modeling, conversion tutorials, make sure to like and subscribe. Warhammer Man Studios, I'm Warhammer Man, and I'm out of here.